Good evening. Buenas tardes. I'm Eduardo Velaro, the Artistic Director and CEO of Ballet Hispanico, and welcome to Instituto Coreográfico. What you just saw was a work in process by Marielis Garcia, who we're going to talk to today. Usually we'd have this Instituto showing live, but just a little longer and we will get there. It is a very different thing watching this live as it is in person, but I think we got a real sense of what the choreographer was working with. So I'm just going to do the little housekeeping. Thank you so much for being here. This Ballet Hispanico Instituto has been on now for almost 7 years, giving voice to Latinx artists who want to explore, delve, and also bring new narratives, new voices into the field. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome Marielis Garcia, and we have other guests. Little by little, I will be introducing them as well. Welcome, Marielis.
Hola, gracias. Thanks for having me.
So I guess we should just start. You should do a little intro. If you could do a little mini bio, how you found dance or dance found you, that would be great.
Sure. Mini bio, I'm Marielis Garcia, born and raised in New York City. In middle school, my family moved to Jersey, northern Jersey, Bergen County, Teaneck. And I did this after-school program and took a dance class at a local studio with what used to be a principal dancer for Dance Theater of Harlem, so a classical ballet class. And I got pretty obsessed. And I was a spicy 13-year-old, and the dance studio owner was like, "Hey, you've got talent." And I was like, "Well, I know this is a way for you to recruit people. My parents don't have money, so how can I barter?" Which now when I think about it, I'm like, what were you thinking? I would never be so brave now, but my 13-year-old self was a lot braver. So I spent my time in the studio absorbing. And since then, I got a BFA at Marymount, Manhattan College, and trained in, the classical forms, continued ballet, Horton, Limon, Graham. And then once I graduated, I started freelancing and got into, I was obsessed with John Jasper's class for a hot minute there, right? Who wasn't? And like the postmodern thing where you feel your bones for 2 hours. And I was like, this is so different. I don't know. So now I've worked with Brian Brooks for a really long time. Helen Simoneau, Peter Kyle. I'm a frequent collaborator with a dear friend named Madeline Hollander, who's sort of straddles the worlds between visual art and dance. And then have really started to make work in the last 5 or 6 years, and especially with a collaborator based in Toronto named David Northworthy. So that's sort of a mosh podge of all the things. Oh, and I just completed my MFA in digital and interdisciplinary art practice. So looking at dance within a digital context. Little did I know I'd be finishing that MFA in the spring of 2020 in the midst of digital dance world.
Well, I know what it's like to have to do an interdisciplinary program. I also have one, and it was just what really changed me and gave me the real drive to make a difference in the art in the dance scene. So I'm so glad you saw. You didn't say about how you. I know you said 5 years ago you started doing choreography, but what led you to that?
Yeah, I say 5 years ago because I think that's when I actually started taking it seriously. I was like, oh, I think this is part of my practice, whatever dancing means to me, this making sort of feels like it's part of my practice. But I started choreographing before then, it sounds ridiculous, but write things in my bedroom with my sister when we're little. And then through college, I made tiny little solos or duets. And then 2010-ish, I made this trio as part of a steps choreographic lab. And so weirdly, choreography has always been sort of a way to investigate my own dancing, I guess, right? Like a musician can go into a studio, like a practice space by themselves and really sort of investigate, especially maybe particularly jazz musicians, sort of replicate something they an inspiration played and then see where they might take it, right? And so I think playing in the studio and creating sort of developed in that sense, where I was mostly just trying to find out more about like, what does my dancing body do, or what is it saying, how does it speak? So that's sort of, and then, so then 5 years ago, I really was like, okay, I'm going to really do this. I'm going to actually like put the time and effort into like making choreographic works and really committing to it. And that was, I made a piece, Fact of Being Carried On, was trying to like demystify the making process of dance. And it was at Signal Gallery in Brooklyn, and it was 3 dancers, and it was basically this timed thing where we had like 10 minutes on and then 2 minutes where we could like stretch, but the whole thing was revealed in front of the audience. And then the last like 15 minutes was the show, and it was all of our creative processes overlapping each other. But all of it was sort of the event. It lasted about an hour and a half.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and again, even in that, it's sort of like looking at practice as a way of performance and performance as a way of practice. So, trying to figure that out all like still.
Yeah, I love the idea that you're considering that. I mean, I think performance is practice, and practice is performance. It's what we do as, because dance is based on our tool, which is our body. So the constant investigation is what really leads us to fulfillment. In certainly when I stopped dancing and started choreographing and working and teaching even more, it was really interesting to say, oh, wow, I wish I could go back now and redo that.
Yeah.
The investigation it's additive, right? The information that you get because you're in another module kind of working differently, right?
For sure. And there's something to be said about, like, I think I'm still trying to find the words for this, but when in classical forms, let's sort of live there. In classical forms, ballet, Horton, Graham, Lamone, in these classical forms, there is a performativity, right? Like a conjuring of a something to like present the steps of some sort. And I'm sort of curious, and the best dancers do this, right, in the classical forms. Where does the self overlap the like choreography? And can we see the real person, that person through the steps, right? Beyond just like, here is the form. So I think that's yeah, like when we think of performance, it's not that I'm like presenting something to you. I'm curious about like, where does like my most real self like exist?
Yeah, and it's interesting because I wonder if we could find some other vocabulary to talk about that.
Because, let's.
Because if you're not going to be performative, then don't call it a performance, right? So how do you find that balance, right? It is a performance. You are hosting something. You could call it an event. You could call it a happening. You could call it this. There's some still. So it almost feels like how we're looking now in the world for new definitions of who we are or who we want to be, how we want to be called, how we want to be approached, all of that stuff. Can we also redefine certain things? And I think that's what you're getting at.
Yes, yeah, that's a great way of putting it. I mean, right, like I'm thinking of amazing actors when you see them on stage, they're acting, but you actually like believe that they're that person. So in some ways there's an inherent performativity there, but right, how do they transcend the lines so that it really it feels like it's them in that moment? And I think, yeah, that dance, yeah, want to exist in that space with movement.
So we've got to do. We have work ahead, and we all
Yeah.
have some work ahead of us.
Oh, for sure.
So you temporal is what you call this section or this work right now that you created on Ballet Hispanico. So it would be interesting for me, and I hope for the audience, to hear, was this your usual process in a residency? And then, what was different about it, or what was the same? And also, what were some surprises that you found out about yourself?
So Temporal was pretty similar to how I approach making. I sort of had this vague idea of phasing that I wanted to play with, where things overlap and come back together, and sort of in terms of like a technical approach. And I also had like created phrases, like things that in my body felt like, oh, this, I would like to see this choreography overlapping, or how does this choreography come back together, get broken apart and come back together. So those elements, a vague idea of some sort and a set series of phrases, whether it's, I think in this particular case, I had 3 really direct set phrases. Those 2 things remained consistent and are usually part of my practice. There was also, I had the luxury of space in your beautiful studios right before rehearsals. And a big part of my practice also is an element of improvisation. So like thinking about the phrases, thinking about the vague concept, and then seeing like physically what comes out with those ideas and what's been happening in the studio. And then from there, being able to sort of create words that might direct the dancers in their own improvisational version of it. So those 3 things, the big idea, the set choreography, and then some kind of like improvisational task, pretty much remain consistent. Things that were really different in this round space, right? Like having a place to go and warm up and do the thinking and the pondering, that felt like a new element. The number of dancers felt like such a luxury and beautiful thing. Usually when I create my own dances, just because of resources, it tends to be smaller casts, not a whole lot of like second cast members sort of learning multiple roles, seeing multiple bodies do the work. And so that felt like, and then also the level of the dancers was bonkers, like so exciting. So that all felt pretty new in this particular context. Things that I learned about myself in this process. I'm a ponderer, and I tend to talk a lot. You noticed. And so one of the things that I'm learning or learned in this process is trying to like just say the thing, as opposed to like, here's some preface, here's some post, and here's the thing, right? So those are the things I'm learning about myself. Anyway.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Each process should be a learning experience. Yeah. I think not only, it's usually that people think about dance, it's only the dancers are learning. They're learning new steps, they're learning new choreography, they're learning new ways of portraying something. And it's really a group effort. Everyone learns. In particular, when we bring someone new into the studio, everyone learns. It's like almost a little culture shifting, right? Yeah. And then you learn that. One of the things that I have a question, and thank you so much, from Joshua Winsler, who was very inspired by your movement voice, and is the use of space patterns was so complex, especially in the context of not having any physical connection, but still having a strong energetic connection. So he wanted to thank you. But the question was, what inspired that movement voice?
Oh, thanks. I don't know. I'm bringing like all the history, right? Here's the backpack of all the things that I've been learning. And so just as I was referencing, there is a deep rootedness in classical forms of like ballet and Lamone. Risa Steinberg came into the studio one day, and that was helpful just to get another pair of eyes. So I'm bringing these histories of form, and then also this history of like questioning form, which we all should be doing, and that like liminal crash maybe is what Josh, you're interpreting as rawness. So yeah, that I think that I have to give credit also to Brian Brooks. I worked with him for a really long time, and he worked with Shred. So there was an inherent physicality to his work that I think has definitely also embedded my work. I did a piece in 2019 where one section, it was a solo, but there was like a Greek chorus and 27 women sort of dancing and moving around. And there was like a 4-minute section of this 30-minute piece where I jump the entire time. It's just jumping. I just really like pushing those physical limits. Like, how can the body, I don't know, push it? So thanks for that. Yeah, I think that.
Yeah, and there's another comment that will bring a question, which Desiree Evans says, the dancers transformed movements of the body into a battle cry. I thought that was interesting. The dancers look like elegant robots with their arms and entire body in full expression. The choreography is amazing.
Thanks. This is such a great reference. There's with Temporal.
That's what I was trying to, yes, that's what I was going to connect. Go ahead.
Yeah, so with Temporal, right, when we talk about the temporal plane, we talk about things that are of here and now, that are earthly. And so it's interesting that you saw like roboticism or sort of like an elegant consistency, because we did talk in the studio about like the people in the room right now, and that this is not going to be forever. So how can we like fully commit to the right now and the physicality of now? And so I think, as opposed to the spiritual plane, which I also really love, because time to me exists in the spiritual plane, and yet temporal refers to time, time being eternal and time being consistent and time being forever. The temporal consists of like the right now. I also like temporal is spelled the same way in Spanish as it is in English. So the word in and of itself feels very much like it resonates with my being, like English and Spanish overlapping, and the temporal, temporal and temporal.
It's at the moment, absolutely. Yeah. So we're going to take just a little moment to see a little bit more of the work, and then we're going to bring in the wonderful Kimberly Bartosik to continue, who was your mentor, to continue the conversation. See? Fantastic.
Let yourself fall back. Nice, Antonio. I can go. Here's where the title is quite perfect for slapjack. Really there's going to be a delay in the body, because I would love to see that the hand actually moves first, and then the body then has to respond to that. So it feels almost like they're separated. Yes, beautiful. And then the fall feels like really.
They're an example of the vocabulary and what we were talking about. Welcome, bienvenida, Kimberly. Thank you so much for being here. And why she's here is because the Instituto pairs a choreographer with a mentor, because sometimes we just need that little voice next to us telling us, hey, 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 Did you pay attention to this? So welcome, Kimberly. I wonder if you can explain how you developed that connection with Marielis and what your role really was about for this development of this work.
Absolutely. Hello. So nice to see you. So nice to be here.
I'm so happy here.
So Marielis and I have had a sort of professional and personal friendship for a while, and through my work, through her work, through teaching, and we had the amazing privilege of having worked together in a much smaller way a few months before we arrived at Ballet Hispanico. So we had developed a language together, and I had been able to witness the way that she worked and sort of how she got to things, so that when I arrived at Ballet Hispanico, I had some information, some knowledge about who she was and who you were, Marielis, and the kind of ideas she was most likely to be exploring. And I felt that my job, how I could serve her in her process the best, was to watch and wait and see what I would really see what was happening, rather than what she said she wanted to have happen, what she wrote about, but really see what was happening in the space, and then help sort of untangle the myriad of ideas and physical impulses that she was both garnering and gathering in the process, sort of unweave them and find identify a core of the piece. And so the first few times that I was in the studio with her, I mostly just watched until I understood what she was trying to get at, because I didn't want to impose my choreographic vision. I wanted to help Marielis realize hers in that moment. And the first, I think it was after maybe by the end of the first week, it seemed that there were maybe like 5 pieces going on, because she's got tons and tons of super profound movement maker. And we talked about how can we move certain things aside and see other things, help other things sort of arrive and arise to the forefront, so that we could create a sort of balance, because she was working with this idea of rhythmic phasing, and so time was really important. And I think the thing that really supported our relationship was trust. Like, I knew that she trusted what I saw, and I trusted what she was putting out there. And so there was this really like circular way of speaking with one another and way of working together, where I knew I could just say, I think you need to look at this dancer. I think you need to look at this one. Just let everything else settle and just look at this one, or just look at this one idea. And slowly some things sort of started to fall away, and other things started to come to a core. And then it just sort of happened by the second week. It just happened. And so much of that was also just witnessing the Ballet Hispanico dancers figure out their journey in her work and in her movement reality, and not take anything for granted. I mean, they really went in deep, even though a lot of it was uncomfortable. And as soon as they started to appear within the work, then we had a different kind of material to work with. So it was I can't believe how much work we did in 2 weeks. It was really amazing. But she had sort of made the piece in day one. I mean, literally, and I said, no more movement. No, we have to deal with like ideas and structure and time and all those things. Very, very rich exchange with everybody.
Do you have something you want to add to that, Marielis?
No, that pretty much sums it up. I had so much material. I mean, with these 3 phrases, I mentioned I brought in 3 phrases and then like choreographic concepts. So we had and I sort of the last hour of the day, we would take time to just like run everything that was in the room. It gives me and I would put it in an order just to see it. And so, by like Wednesday, we had 2 weeks to create this. And so the first Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we're sort of creating. But by that Wednesday at 5 o'clock, we had like a 40-minute run of material, like no transitions, right? Just like, here's this, here's that. But yeah, that's the day that Kim was like, yeah, maybe stop creating and just look at what you have in the room. Yeah, I'm grateful for that.
So that's interesting, because one of my questions were, where were the stumbling blocks, and then where were the triumphs? And maybe you can speak to how Kimberly aided you, or you aided Kimberly to understand what you were doing.
Yeah, I don't know. There was in the second week, so there's a lot of material, and as you saw, like there's both a physicality that I'm sort of pushing, but then also a brain space of like, how do I bring myself to, how am I Shelby, or how am I Lene doing Marielis's choreography? And so by the second week, the dancers were approaching it with a really sort of almost aggressive physicality, just like push through, like let's make it happen. And there was this beautiful moment where Kimberly, we did a run. This is the second week. We have a sort of structure built in. And we did a run, and Kimberly looked at me and was like, I'm going to be risky here and say that dancers just need to stretch a bit before the next run. And I was like, love that idea. I love that idea. And I think it made all the difference. Like, there was something that happened in the room after you led this Klein influenced tactility of stretching, that then there was this sort of like rejoiceful like approach to the piece that really transformed the journey. And so I feel like that for a second, it like transcended just the making and was like, right, not only are we making, but we're like acknowledging the people who are making with us. And I was really inspired by that moment.
Yes. Yeah, I think it was a transformative moment. I remember watching that run and just recognizing that because the dancers are so exquisite and so professional, that despite their intense fatigue, because the movement is so repetitive and it's so much like back and forth on the same side, that they were trying to make their bodies do something. And Marielis's work is about rigor, but not about aggressivity with the body. So it's more like the humility of the human form, and that we can do amazing things, but then we have to give the body a little space to catch its breath and get rid of some of the lactic acid so that then we can go back in, because I felt like if they just had kept pushing, somebody might get injured. And then there's a sort of crazy joy, an ecstatic joy in the piece about arriving somewhere and getting through something, which is sort of the world we're in right now, that they could only access that if their bodies had a little bit of more space in it. That was Eduardo when you walked in. I'll do my body work before I thought, oh God, he's going to think we're not working.
I was like, what's going on? What happened? Did someone get hurt? And the first thing I worry about is their safety. So I'm like, what? And then I realized what was happening. So I'm glad it helped them. So, you know, these things, one of the reasons why we have Instituto Coreográfico is because our community also benefits from opening up or lifting the veil, the mystique of creating work as artists, because we're always thought as these mysterious beings at times, right? And unapproachable and untenable sometimes. So I'm wondering if you can, there was someone who had a question, let me see if I can find it, I'm sorry, about the improvisational aspects of this, and how you add that into choreographing and how you manipulate it. And then maybe Kimberly does this as well in her work. So please feel free to answer, or answer as in helping Marielis. But I think it'd be great to just walk through that a little bit. utilizing improvisation?
Yeah, there's a section called Octo Walk, and I'm not sure if you might remember the dancers are sort of moving one way and then the other, and then one way and then the other, but they're also moving linearly across the diagonal in this like zigzaggy slow motion, and in creating that, there was this sort of verbal task of you already have. Octo Walk was created from Octo Chaos, which has set choreography, and it's that last section of the piece where there's just sort of like 8 people sort of doing their own thing and then meet up and then do their own thing. And so Octo Walk was like, okay, the choreography is set, but you actually have to change the spirit of that choreography so that it moves in this forward and back. And so that was it was inspired by this improvisational task that we did multiple times. And the more we do it, the more the dancers, A, understand the prompt, B, start to codify their own version of it, and like C, sort of find how it transcends into the piece. So Octo Walk has this improvisatory influence or initiation maybe, but the more the dancers do it, the more specific and the more clear it gets, while still having that sense of investigation in the prompt. So that's one of the ways that improv sort of came through in the piece.
I think it's also, I mean, just to, I think, further clarify what you mean by improvisation, I think that there are parts in your work, and same thing with my work, where there's a structure and there's a something that needs to happen, but there are not necessarily steps for within which that needs to happen. And that if every performer is really in the moment in that time and not making a plan or not thinking of the past, they're really in that moment, then the choice making will be very alive. And there's a lot of risk in that, because then you really have to rely on people. It's not that they're going to do something so different, but if you're really in that moment, then your body is going to be in that moment. And so it's so much about responsiveness within a structure, not a sort of like open improvisation where anything could happen anytime, but really understanding that there's a container, mm-hmm. which you want something to live. You want it to be alive. And that's why I've loved working with you so much, because I think we share that, like, we want it to be alive. We want it to look like it's happening now for the first time, but there's knowledge. So it's absolutely not for the first time. But, and I think that a lot of that is informed also by how people see what's happening. So I think it was Omar maybe who said, I've never used my eyes so much. I think there's really seeing, not looking, seeing. You really see, oh, that's my friend here doing this. And so, right. And so I have to do this to be there because they need me to be there. And so the liveness, I think, is to go back to Eduardo, I thought your question about was super, super interesting about we might say, oh, it's not performative, but it's a performance. It is a performance, right? But how can it be lived in that moment, every moment, for real? And that demands a certain kind of sort of like psychic commitment from the dancers. Like they just have, and it can't be about how they feel. It has to be about how they expose what they're feeling through the doing of the thing. I danced for Merce Cunningham for a very long time, many, many, many years ago. And I feel like that I really learned that in his work, because none of it was improvisational, but because we didn't have any music cues or light cues or anything. We just had each other.
Right.
And so that act of being like in the moment, because if you're not in the moment, you're going to let somebody down. And I think that makes for a very particular kind of performative, non-performative performance, but it's performative because we're in a performance, right?
Yeah, I think that the same, that like trust of like collective psyche, when you're in like a physical state where it's just completing the physical task is with everyone else and in full responsibility with anyone else, with a humility like that, like communal grasp, to me is where like performance gets really exciting. And that I think
I totally agree and understand where it coming, where what you mean by that, and I was interested in that performative, because I'm much older than both of you fabulous young ladies, and even in the old days of working with either Graham or some of the pioneers of modern dance, the notion of being in the moment has always been there. The notion of understanding that you are in an ensemble and you have to watch out. I mean, if you do a tally beady work and you are not on that music, you're going to run someone over, or someone's going to run you over. So I think that what you are saying is how you deepen that and open that up. It's not that other dance doesn't have that ensemble work and that consciousness. But the approach leads you to something different in the moment that you were talking about, because yes, I think that sometimes we see, and I'm talking about maybe not professional work, and the work that kids do in schools. It gets to be very rote and very automatonic, and so that can lead you into not being with yourself and being in your presence and at the moment. So I love that we're having this conversation. I'd love to have more of it, but I'm going to show another little section and then bring in two of our fabulous dancers that worked with Marielis. Kimberly, thank you so much for joining us, and I hope to see you soon.
Thank you so much.
Okay, a little snapshot of the work.
Like the dynamicism of what you're doing reads less. Whereas if right, like if the head is involved in the journey, I think we are brought into your forward back. We're like brought into it with you in some way. Yeah, like it almost like crystallizes it somehow.
And then keeping that same sensation of forward and back. When you go back, there's a fear melting, and then when it goes forward, there's almost like a curiosity and presence.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep talking as you guys go. And I think that it's the moments of forward still go forward until the moment of back is still going back until the shift is forward.
I love that clip only because it shows and says so much, the repetition, how you can really see the body change and see the dancers react different and bring it into their bodies. So with us, we have Lene Wilkerson and Amanda Del Valle. And welcome.
Hi, how are you guys?
Bienvenidas. So these are both Ballet Hispanico dancers who were part of the process, and so I just thought it would be great for our audience to hear from the dancers. And my question to the dancers is, what was it like to bring this work into your body and your own process? Because there is a process that you're going through at the same time.
Hi, I guess I'll start. First off, it's just been such an honor to sit and hear about your experience with the work, because I have an experience being in it and in the process, and then getting to see it was absolutely amazing as well. I think some takeaways that I've had in experiencing and embodying was the fact that we started with something like Octa Chaos on the first day. That was very rigorous, and embodied the 3 phrases that you brought into the studio, and how we had a way of restructuring the very clear choreographic style, and then having the section of Octo Chaos come up in different various ways throughout the process. So for instance, going off and doing trios with the way that we restructured the phrase, or you know, taking one gestural movement and sticking with it and having it evolve, and how that found its way into the piece as well, and what you were talking about with temporal and things like that from earlier. And it was honestly very riveting being back in the studio, back in our dance home after a year. And something that I feel like I took away from the experience was how you really encouraged us to delve into each movement, where it came from. You kept talking about it coming from the back of the body, and how we can create more space, especially because we now have more space. And I kept going back to the fact that, you know, we were confined to these small containers. That's the thing we've been talking about in this discussion, these, like, you know, small little boxes of rooms, and being able to really take up space. So I was very appreciative of how we were able to embody space again after a year off.
Yeah, definitely. I agree, Lene. Like, that 100% embodying space was a huge concept for the entire process. I felt, and especially growth, like it just made me really grow differently as an artist. Once we had that, our improv session with the ball, our little exploring inside a sphere, I felt like I was in Marielis's mind. You know, it's just, you think differently, and it's so, you can tell the way you describe, just the way your hand brushes through the air, like it's just a different way of expression. And I think your movement really speaks your expression. And like, once in the beginning process, it was, I think, personally, I'm not sure how everyone else felt, it was a challenge to find that process, because I'm so structured, ballet, you know, technique and everything. And then letting go. I feel like letting go is a huge, huge key. Letting go, trusting process. And I think how what Kimberly had said, like structure, and then finding different ways beyond the structure, and trusting everyone around you while trusting in yourself as well, which is great. And I feel just the whole process was beautiful. It was amazing and truly a blessing. So thank you.
Thank you. That's so nice. To piggyback, I want to also credit Linda Celeste Sims for being in the rehearsal space, right? She said at one point something like, you have to be on to be off. And I love that liminal space of like, right, like we all love a good classical passe, but I also like it when we're like falling off and just like, yeah. And so that, Amanda, you just said, right, like the structure of classical form in relationship to then the chaos or the falling off or the backspace of taking up space where you can't see, and those two distinct sensations in the body, very clear form in relationship to like, I don't know how far I'm going to fall, right? Like existing in that spectrum is so fun. And yeah, I'm happy I got to share that with you all.
Yeah, just expanding awareness as well.
I have a question for Marielis and then a question for the dancers. So Marielis, when did you, just for fun, at what point did you see the transition that they were embodying the work that you were putting out?
You know, it happened the first week we were experimenting. There was that improvisation with the ball where we're like moving a ball inside of the body, and really sort of both visually tracking it and that imagination. I was just thinking the other day, to create an invention, you have to, right, like this is so obvious. I sound like an idiot, but like to create an invention, you have to imagine it first. Like it has to exist where it doesn't exist. And And so like same with movement, like you really have to see it in the body, see it, like really see it in your body for it to be fully expressed out. And so we started to explore that that first week, but I really think by Tuesday of the second week, right, we had like a full first week and there's just a shit ton of information in the room. And so everyone's sort of like, me included, I'm processing that information and trying to both respond and take in as much as possible. But then on Tuesday, we all had a 3-day break, a little space, and then a little bit of like remembering. And then on Tuesday, there was just this transformation where there was a real sense of ownership and like acuity of, right, like I don't have to do it the way Marielis did it. I just have to find the way I do it. And I really saw that sort of clarify that first day back.
And so maybe individually, Lene, you know, you've been trained, you've done everything from foresight to Graham and other works. And so, yeah, it's so interesting. We as artists and dancers, we grab things. What do you take from this work that you'll insert into your toolkit?
That's great. I mentioned this, I think, in the first week when we had a talk back at the end of a rehearsal day. And I think my biggest takeaway was trust the process. Something I feel like, do you remember when I said that? Yeah, I really felt that deeply because, you know, as you were saying with, you know, putting so many things out into the space, we had so much in the space. And it was about, you know, doing and committing to what it is that we had, and not knowing where we were going to get to with a product, but trusting the process. And at some point it clicked for all of us in our own embodiment, and just understanding and trusting that that will happen. And that's something that I feel like I have learned from a lot of different processes, whether it be foresight or a Graham process or whatever. Having that understanding of trusting the process is so key, and helps alleviate any stresses. I know for me, I always stress about having a shorter plie and knowing that this work required, you know, this depth that I sometimes don't lean into. And so as I was speaking about earlier with not fully embodying things, that was something that I felt like I was struggling with in the process, was how can I be bigger, especially after, you know, being confined to a smaller space for a year and then not realizing I'm back in my dance home and I have space to take up the space. Trusting that I can do that, trusting the process, trusting repetitive movement, trusting. So that's my biggest takeaway. And I'm so thankful that I had that opportunity to work on that.
And Amanda, you already spoke about, you know, your structured technical background and upbringing. What will you take away from the process?
Yeah, I agree with trusting the process. One of the biggest things, and another thing I would say is awareness. Just awareness of yourself, the space around you, the people around you, because that is such a big, I feel like it's such a big aspect in your growth and as an artist. It's crucial. It's definitely crucial. Awareness and trusting everything. So I agree.
My goodness, I know I ask questions quickly, but the time just flies and there's so much that I want to be able to share. So I want to thank the dancers, Amanda, Lene, thank you so much for being here. I can't wait to see you back in the studio. And a huge thank you. I do want to, again, what you said, thank you for that, Marielis. Linda Celeste Sims, who helped as our new rehearsal director. It's amazing to have her in the room with us, and we all feel that. Marielis, thank you so much. Thank you for being with us today. Muchas gracias. Espero hasta la próxima. I'm just going to sign off with everyone for our audience. Thank you so much for being here. Make sure you follow us on social media. Stay up to date with our upcoming events. Facebook, Twitter, @Ballet Hispanico, Instagram, @Ballet Hispanico, and Ballet Hispanico EDU. By the way, we just had an amazing 50th anniversary celebration. If you didn't catch it, si no lo vieron, por favor, you can still watch our 50th celebration through June 12th. Visit our website for more information. If you enjoyed this programming, please consider supporting Ballet Hispanico. And I bid you adieu. Muchas gracias y nos vemos pronto. Chao.
Ciao.
Gracias.